So, hello, Joel. Hello, Wes. Hello, everybody. We are very honored to welcome you here on stage in La Fémis today during 2 hours in this afternoon, and because we know that you are very, very busy and so iconic, so acclaimed everywhere, and so eager to start a new film after an old one. So very thank you. And thank you too to Bruno Delbonnel, who make this possible. Possible for both students from La Fémis, but as well from Louis Lumière, our fellow school, and their students and their team. So thank you, students of Louis Lumière, to be there too. And thank you, of course, to Sabine Lancelin, our beloved head of department, DOP department, and Frédéric Papon, our head of studies, beloved as well, who helped the students to prepare this afternoon. In fact, it was a real challenge to gather you, both of you, on this stage, because your filmography is so rich and so. But it's so different. Your style are so different that it's a real challenge to gather you here. So it was so complex to lead this masterclass that we asked the students to prepare it and to make this to lead this conference during these three hours. And so I let Matthias talk with you. There are no excerpts, no clips, no trailers. It will be only clips. It will be only talks, sorry. And so we hope everything will be good. And thank you very much.
Je voudrais juste dire que Wes doit partir vers 3h30. Donc on va... il a beaucoup de travail, il vient de finir son film là. Donc on va faire, je crois, 1h30. Après, il s'en va et on finira avec Joël, qui lui peut rester jusqu'à demain.
Merci Bruno. Well, thank you, Bruno, for organizing this encounter. For us, it's a huge opportunity, and I don't think when I was given the opportunity to, with a group of fellow students who are sitting here, and at some point we might switch a little bit because I think everyone has questions they would like to ask. When we were given this opportunity, we immediately thought that it would be interesting because we are film students and we are with two of the great directors of our time to be able to ask you questions that are related to our film studies. Because oftentimes when I saw interviews and when we thought, well, we're neither journalists nor film intellectuals. We are taught in this school the practicalities of filmmaking. So I thought that even if it's a little bit scholarly, it'll be interesting to just go through the different stages of making a film, from the idea to the development, then pre-production, and then talking about editing. And here we have students from the 2 main film schools in France, and they have technical departments and screenwriting departments and editing departments. And my idea, and what I would like to ask also from the students, is if ever during the conversation there's a question that arises, then they just need to put up your hand, and there'll be someone with a microphone coming to you. So I think an interesting question, because we have the opportunity of having both of you here, would be like, when did you two meet? I know that you met quite a while ago, and maybe we can start from there.
I think it was right after you made Bottle Rocket, and we were cutting Fargo, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, well, and also it's a sort of a kind of a Hollywood answer to the question, because we have the same agent. So that's really how we met. originally. But in fact, Joel could not recall this, but I actually, when we were editing the first movie that I made, it was in a not very nice place in Santa Monica, big facility where they have dozens of movies being edited at once. And I was walking down the corridor, and I knew they were doing Fargo there, but I'd not seen them there, but and I didn't know them. But I looked in a doorway as I was walking past what I knew were the Fargo rooms, and I saw a machine that I recognized from old photographs, and I thought, I think that's a moviola. Which was not in popular use at that time. You know, what a moviola is, it's really, a moviola is for viewing rushes, really, right? That's all you do on the moviola, is that right? Or can you cut?
No, you can cut on them. It's what Wes is talking about. I'm sure you know, or you've seen pictures at least. It's an upright moviola. They also made flatbed moviolas, but the old upright moviolas were the industrial green machines with 2 or 6 gangs, one picture head and 2 sound heads sometimes. And they were originally, things were cut on them, but when I learned how to cut, it was with a woman I was an assistant to a woman who used an upright moviola to mark up the takes and view the takes, and then she would assemble them on a flatbed.
She picked the material on the moviola and then moved to the flatbed to actually cut.
And that's why, because that's how I learned how to do it. That's why we were, in fact, you know, it's interesting, around that time, I was with my wife in the Santa Monica flea market, and some guy was selling an upright moviola. It was there, and I was sitting there looking at the machine, and he came up to me and he said, "Yeah, they used to cut movies on these things. Can you imagine?" I still do.
But when I saw the machine in the door, I then sort of walked into the office and was getting closer and closer to it. And then I heard someone say, "Can I help you?" And I saw you and Ethan and someone else, Trish, I think, was there, all staring at me, and I couldn't think of anything to say. I should have said, "Oh, I beg your pardon. I've never seen one of these, and I'm sorry to interrupt." Instead, I just backed out of the room and then kind of ran down the corridor, and that would be when we first met, really officially.
And did you meet again after? I mean, was that like the first meeting, and then a few years went by, and
25 years passed. No, we did. No, very shortly after, we met again in this same place in Los Angeles, where we were both cutting.
So you said you were doing the editing of Bottle Rocket, which was your first feature film, and I think that's also an interesting place to start, because a lot of us students are. Well, we work on short films while we're at school, but a lot of us are looking at ways of starting with our first feature. Like, what was the experience like of developing and thinking about the first feature? I guess for Bottle Rocket and Blood Simple in your case.
Do you want to go first or me?
Well, Blood Simple was. What was the experience like? We were actually very, very fortunate. And I don't know if your experience is sort of parallel to this, because in making that movie, we tried to raise money to do it. It was an independently made movie. We tried to, get a film company interested in doing it. And no one was the least bit interested in working with us, which sort of threw us back onto our own resources, and we had to somehow get the budget of the movie together ourselves, and we managed to after about a year and a half. And we thought at the time it was quite unlucky, because if someone had offered to finance the movie right off the bat, we would immediately have said yes with whatever strings were attached. But the fact that that didn't happen proved to be fortunate, because we then had complete control over the movie. both the production of the movie and the finishing of the movie. We had nobody there telling us what we could do or we couldn't do. And once we'd done it on the first movie, we felt it perfectly legitimate to, in a sense, institutionalize that.
And did you get where I think at the time when we were trying to make Bottle Rocket, I read about some of the ways you had assembled the money, but did you do there were legal terms I was trying to study and learn, like limited partnership, limited partnership, whatever that is, and that mean that. But you had many different investors who were not really necessarily movie investors, right?
None of them were movie investors, and they were all investors for extremely small amounts of money. So then they would buy an equity position in the movie for a very small amount of money. And up until about a year ago, 35 years later, the partnership still existed, although we started calling it the Dead Partners Society because most of them had died.
Yes, they began to leave us.
Along to their heirs and assigns. So we finally sort of dissolved it. But yes, it was,
to dissolve it, you bought them out?
We bought them out.
And so you own the negative of the film just outright now. Yeah, right. But when we did Bottle Rocket, we were trying to do that we were trying to go to dentists and accountants and but we couldn't get that money. We didn't even try to go to movie studio money. We just tried to go to dentists. But we didn't succeed to raise. The only money we got was $2,000 from my father, with many strings attached, and $2,000 from Owen Wilson's father, and that was really all we had to begin with. And then we sort of stalled for a long time, and then by complete chance, we did end up with movie studio money, and with it because. It was Jim Brooks. Yeah, it was Jim Brooks and Polly Platt. This was the director, producer Jim Brooks. Polly Platt, who was a production designer, but also she wrote some films. I think she made the script for Pretty Baby with Louis Malle.
And produced some films.
And produced many films. And she was really the producer of our movie. And Kit Carson. Did you ever meet Kit Carson?
No, I know who he is, but I've never met him.
He was a Texan. He was the one who kind of brought us into this. So we ended up making the movie for a much bigger budget than we wanted, which is extremely unusual in a film to have a larger budget than you want or should have in that case. And in fact, the result was because it was ended up being Columbia. So they had a sort of minimum amount they wanted to spend on a movie that was like $6 million or something. The movie grossed $550,000, so it was a tremendous failure on an extremely small scale for them.
How did that situation of, because it's quite a particular situation of being in a case where your first film is over budgeted, how did that affect your process as a first-time filmmaker? Did you first tell yourself this is great, or did it affect the process of working on the film?
I don't know how much it really affected. It was really that I had primed myself to make a movie where I knew the ratio of how much footage we're shooting to how much is actually getting cut into the movie, and how everything I had prepared myself for was the guerrilla tactics of making a movie that I thought we were doing. And suddenly, and in fact, the movie was very conventionally organized in all the kind of traditional American movie-making rules, which over the years I really have bristled with and tried to get to just do none of it. But it's a movie where people had offices in trailers, and they had the way the day is kind of set up is all based on the way it's always done in movies, but it was a good experience. I mean, we had great collaborators, and the director of photography on that movie I still work with. I've never done a movie without him over all these years. Yeah, I mean, it was a very good experience.
Are there any questions? Des questions? Vous pouvez aussi poser des questions en français, et puis on fera la traduction, bien sûr.
I'm curious, at what point did Jim and Polly get involved?
Well, the way that happened was Kit Carson, this Texan who Owen's father knew. He had seen part of a short. They were friendly with him, and they showed him this bit of a short film that we had made. We thought we were making a feature film. We were making 16 millimeter black and white feature film a little bit at a time. And but we stalled. We spent the $4,000, and we didn't come up with any more for some years. So he got involved that way, and he introduced us to this woman who worked with Roger Corman named Barbara Boyle. She was a lawyer. She's a lawyer, then she knew Polly Platt, and it made its way from one person after another. We had a very, very long script because we had formatted it. We didn't know the right formatting, and when they actually retyped it for us, it was 320 pages. It was a lot of there was a lot of just talk in it. There wasn't very much that happened really, but there was a lot of talk in it. And in fact, Jim Brooks had us do a reading of it. He came to see us in Dallas, and we did. He said, "Let's read it." And the reading was one of the worst experiences of my life because it turned out to just be endless. But he ended up eventually doing the movie anyway. Didn't completely scare him off.
And at that time, you were already in a collaboration with Owen Wilson, and which later led to working also with Luke Wilson on this film. How did you learn? Both of you were, I guess, starting out at that point. How do you learn from this experience of being like kind of helped in the process of editing the screenplay into something that could be ready to shoot?
Yes, well, we had, I think, I don't know your experience with this, but for me, in a way, I've never been as prepared to make a movie as I was with. That was a bit like when they say somebody's first record album, they spend a decade getting ready for it, and then they do it, and then now suddenly you've got to do another one in the next year and a half or something like that. So we had rehearsed the movie for 4 years, I would say, by the time we were shooting it. But in fact, to edit the script to proper length was very, very easy. There was so much material that was just obviously not very dramatic, and it was a very quick process. It was an emergency session of, I think we need to fix this, or we're not going to have this opportunity for long, and so we quickly cut it down. And then I think. I storyboarded all the movie, so I kind of had a pretty good sense of how we would shoot it, I guess. I mean, how much do you prepare the shots now?
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you said, because that and the analogy to people doing their first record is really true too. But that you're never as prepared as you were for your. Because you're terrified. So you go in and you've never done it before. And I remember when we were doing storyboards for the first movie we did, we were going, well, should we also do like floor plans, of each setup? Yeah, yes. Which is, a little beyond what you actually need. But, that kind of being hyper prepared, or being able to, in a sense, another lesson you learn if you start out working on very small budgets, of course, is that, if the designer comes up to you and says, do you need, 2 walls on this set, or 3 walls, or 4 walls? It makes you think about it in a different way, because the implicit part of that is you can't afford 4 walls. Yeah. So that's another way in which you have to sort of pre-visualize what you're doing, or at least have some plan. But I know that it's also a habit that sticks with you. I mean, we still do we do a lot of preparation, and the set runs in a way which is not simply sort of, and I know from being on your sets that your sets are also very organized and run like a Swiss watch, actually. So it's a habit, I think, that comes from that kind of early production.
I don't know why I keep thinking about the dentists because I had this idea.
I don't know if there really was a dentist. Was there?
No, we had a few.
Oh, good. I thought so.
I
I remember that properly.
I had this flash of a serious man where there is this kind of mystical relationship to dentists. But I think thinking about development, I mean, in both cases, it feels like you were both in positions when you started off with your first film where either you were seeking the kind of independence to make the movie on your own terms, or you were lucky enough to be in a situation where you had the movie prepared and people that surrounded you, that supported you through it. Did it ever cross your mind while you were writing or developing your first screenplay to ever try to did you ever think we're gonna maybe try to work through a more studio kind of approach to our filmmaking, or was it always the case that you said we're gonna bang on the door of dentists until we get our own kind of project on the road?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what you mean by a studio approach to filmmaking. I mean, I think one of the reasons why both Wes and my brother and I have not exactly gone down that path is because when I think of that, I think of the studio developing material that they then bring to a director, or they do it with a director. And that's not the way that either of us have worked. So it goes more to that, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it goes to that. And also, well, I learned from you and Ethan in particular, how I kind of observed how much, because you started by making your whole production, then you continue to do that. You run the whole movies. For me, that happened more. I tried to emulate that over the years, and I did a movie where it was each movie I made for a little while. Each movie was a bit bigger budget, and the movies, the first few movies, each one had a little bit bigger audience, because the first one had a very, 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 very small audience, and so it didn't have to go far before it was a step up that justified a bit more, But then I made the one in Italy, Life Aquatic. This movie was very, very big, and I had the idea that I was making a kind of in a way I thought I was making a very sort of studio movie. We were using big sound stages. It was kind of a big budget for that time, and we had ships, and we had some enormous sets. And we had people. I mean, I always go back to the trailers, but we had 9 different trailers, like caravan trailers, parked outside, each with a movie star in it who might want to come out to the set or might not come immediately, or we say, can so and so come? And he says, has the other one there yet? Or tell me when this one leaves. They're all waiting to see the other person leave their trailer. And that's another version of studio filmmaking to me. It made the movie very expensive, and we went, we shot for 100 days. There were other things. I mean, we were against the sea, which is a formidable enemy if it's not with you. But I think it made the filmmaking a struggle, and after that I completely changed so many things in the way. I mean, my first thing was every actor puts on their own makeup, takes care. I mean, we reduced the set to the most Spartan thing that ended up doesn't totally work. We tried to create something that was so basic that it was actually impossible, especially because the next movie it was. It's also very complicated. It wasn't like a thing you could just make. I kept saying we're doing a student film, but it was a student film on a train in India, which is just, it's not that easy to do a student film that way. So anyway, that's kind of long-winded thing of another part of my experience.
But that's also very resonant for me, because I think that if you think about studio movies as being the full-on, you're making Cleopatra type of thing, and the experience that both of us have had, and the experience we're trying to always struggling to get back to in a way, is a question of reduction. So you're always going, you realize that there's a tipping point where conventional studio ways of making movies are actually less economical, less productive, and more irritating, frankly. Yeah. I mean, just in every way. So you're trying to reduce the crew, and I think we both tried to hit that area where, if you actually go below this, then it's actually counterproductive in terms of efficiency. Right. But it's a really hard balance to strike.
Yeah, that's it, because you sort of want to turn around. I mean, my experience after a few movies was I wanted to turn around on the set and see essentially no one there except for somebody who I know he's the one who's doing the lighting change, and everybody has something specific that they're doing, and it's a little group. But then something goes wrong, and you want to immediately solve it, and that's the balance, is having the team in place. But sort of, you do kind of want everybody to be slightly invisible when you're trying to, do some imaginary scene.
Well, that's interesting. How do you? I mean, I feel like in both your cases, we're talking about you've developed a kind of method of a kind of independent but your own system, which becomes kind of a studio system. And it's interesting you say you would tend toward liking to be in the smallest crew possible, and then at the same time it feels like every movie you make is expansive. How do you reconcile that kind of balance?
Well, I think for both of us it's gone back and forth, depending on what the sort of requirements or exigencies of the production are. But I think it's also true that in each of our cases we have, I think, what we feel is a group of people that we work with, which is a really great machine that makes the movie with us and enables us to do what we want to do, and that comes over time. I have to say, the other part of what we were talking about before is not so different from what you used to see actually in Hollywood a long time ago. So you would have these dynasties of people who would do certain jobs, like the Westmores who did makeup, Yeah. And the thing about that you always heard about them was that you never saw them in the lens. They never came in and started touching an actor when the shot was set up. And the last one of that generation I worked with on a movie about 20 years ago, and it was true. He was never on the set. You would never see him in the monitor or through the lens. Yeah. It's just a tradition of standing back and having respect for the work that has to be done by other people.
Yes, there was there was very strict training in the etiquette of the movie set in those days, I think, that sort of. And I mean, there are so many great crews and so many great people my experience has been all the people bring so much expertise, but it's a different kind of mentality. Used to be everyone wearing neckties, and you see a photograph of an Alfred Hitchcock set, and it's like an office, and that's not the way now.
I have a small question. Before we move on to more of a production process of your films, we were talking about your first movie, Blood Simple and Bottle Rockets. I'd be very interested to have a few words from you on how you came from, directing short films to making this is the film I want to make, and how did you find the idea, and also you convinced yourself that you were onto something that was going to be your first feature film, and the development of those characters. I was thinking especially of the role of Owen Wilson in Bottle Rockets, which is a very unusual character, how did you come up with him, and how did you think that I'm going to build a film around that wacky character?
Yes,
That's a question for both of you.
Well, yeah, I mean, my experience of doing the first film was that's what we had. You know, we didn't have, it wasn't like we had a drawer full of different scripts we were trying to get going. We had one idea, which was, barely an idea. I mean, the real idea was we want to make a movie. And we sort of started assembling around that. And, Owen's character in that film came from largely from the fact of saying, well, let's have Owen be one of the guys. What can we do for Owen? But also Owen, we wrote a funny role. I thought, I think we wrote something that used a lot of, drew on people around us and things like that. But Owen did have a kind of, not to like compliment the movie, but he was sort of channeling something. I felt like during that he was very just in tune with the character he was playing. And sometimes I wish I could re-edit the movie, because I feel like I remember takes where I would just keep rolling and he was just making up the things spontaneously, but a bit like quite electric. He was just inventing dialogue right there that was that probably should have been in the movie. And I mean, that would have been the longer version. But I should probably go back to those dailies at some point and see what's in there.
It's funny because we did re-edit Blood Simple 15 years after. It was a little bit different. That was the opposite in a way. It was we never watch our movies after they're done, but maybe 10 or 15 years after we did Blood Simple, I had to watch it because the circumstances aren't important. But I watched it and I thought, wow, I don't know. And I thought I think we should recut this because I think we've learned something about editing since then, and we made it about 9 minutes shorter.
Yes, that's the only. It's very hard to advertise that. Director's cut contains 9 minutes less footage than any version you've seen.
But yeah, it's true. Owen was on fire on that movie. It's when it would be interesting to see what's in the vault.
Yeah, he did some funny things.
With us, it was a little bit different because I was working as an assistant editor for a very interesting woman named Edna Paul in New York, who was cutting mostly what we called at the time, this is in the early 80s, splatter movies. They were, horror films where the blood was on the floor, on the walls, everywhere. And one of which was Sam Raimi's first movie, The Evil Dead. And I got to know Sam, and he, I was very curious how he had gotten the money together for the movie. And he had essentially made a feature, a previous feature of the same movie on Super 8. Right. And taken it around and gotten people to invest in a more sophisticated feature on 16 millimeter. And so we used that sort of model. We said, well, okay. We made a trailer for the movie before we shot the movie. It was very abstract, but it had a kind of, big thumping soundtrack and some scares in it. And it was all done on the model of a early 80s horror film. And we took that trailer around.
Who was in it?
Nobody you could see. That was one of the exercises. And again, it was kind of an interesting formal exercises. How do you make a trailer for a movie that hasn't been shot yet? And how do you do it so that you don't see any faces? That were the two requirements. And that's kind of what it was. So we did that. We shot it on 35 millimeter. We made a little 16 millimeter reduction print and then schlepped it around for 9 months to people's living rooms, asking them to invest in the movie. Because we figured if we called people up and we said, would you like to invest in a movie, they would say no. But if we called people up and we said, we'd like to come over to your house and show you some film, we might get our foot in the door.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was how we.
And so but you had the script. You had the script and
Yes, the script. Yeah.
And did the trailer have? Did it tell a bit of the story, or was it a mood setting thing?
No, it was mostly a mood setting.
Mostly
yeah.
mood, yeah.
It told it was clear it was a murder thriller.
Yeah.
You know, and that it took place in Texas.
Right.
And
did it have any voiceover?
No, it had title cards.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That related to that were lines from the
related,
script.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Did the dentists like that cut?
Well, you know, we had the most sophisticated thing about it was the soundtrack, because we had really good people working on the soundtrack, and Lee Dichter mixed it, and it was a big, so we kind of blew people away sonically more than anything else.
Yeah.
It was a little sleight of hand.
Were there shots that are in the trailer that then were reflected in the movie?
We reproduced the bullet holes coming through the wall that each had their own inky behind them.
Yes.
It's the most
little
absurd
a little light that shines through
exercise in light, illogical lighting. But we reproduced that.
That's funny. That's good.
Were you already working with Carter Burrell at the time of that trailer? No, that was before.
No, we met Carter when we were quite late in the process of making the other movie. In fact, we had a previous composer that was working on it who we kind of parted ways with, and Carter was someone who came in on that first movie at the last minute because we needed a composer. So.
And you said you didn't have a cast for that trailer. How did you go about casting your first movie? I guess, we've talked about it a little bit for Bottle Rocket, but in case of Blood Simple?
Well, in the case of Blood Simple, we hired a casting director named Barry Moss, Julie Hughes and Barry Moss, who were primarily casting Broadway musicals. And they brought people, actually, they said, we walked in their office, I remember, and they said, how do you like to do this? And we were like, I don't know, we've never done it before. How do other people do it?
Yeah.
And he said, well, people often like to bring actors in, talk to them. If they like them, then bring them back and have them read a scene. So we spent 2 weeks meeting actors, talking to them, and Barry then said, who do you like? And I said, well, I like all of them. And so then we brought them all back and they read, and at that point I went, I never want to bring actors in again just to talk to them.
Yes.
Because I can't discern anything from that.
Right.
So, but when I have them, when I can work with them, then I can discern something.
And still, you read everybody basically, right?
Unless we've worked with them before.
Yeah, which I think is great.
And the case of Bottle Rocket must have been interesting as well, because you had, aside from Owen and Luke, you had some pretty big names associated, like James Caan and.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, James Caan also had our agent, so that was the way that happened. We tried to get somebody. We had our cast was really most of it was just people who were either our friends or they were local actors. We were in Dallas, Texas, so they were either local actors or people we knew, who were really from our neighborhood. But we had one part that we had written specifically. This is the part we're going to try to get a movie star to play, and it was. It was a very, very long. That was when I really first time we had lots of people we tried to get, and then we had lots of people also read for it. But we wrote it for not James Caan, but James Coburn. That was the actor who we had actually written the part for, we sort of before
Did you send it to him?
Well, what happened was we knew his manager named Hilly Elkins. Did you ever meet Hilly Elkins? No. He was a very small, pink, with a white goatee manager. He was married to Claire Bloom, the actress Claire Bloom, for a period of time. And I don't know if in France they call it this. We in America they refer to a Napoleonic complex. That's someone who's very short, who has a very nice. Yes, I'm sure that it's originally a French term. It's a French person. It's what? Yes, it's the same. He had the most pure Napoleonic complex I've ever seen, because the whole house in Beverly Hills was filled with Napoleon. Statues, paintings, busts and everything. It was very upfront. This is my role model. And we met James Coburn at Hilly Elkins' house, and he was very nice, and we met him on the set of Maverick also, but kind of before we had the chance to offer him the part, his disinterest in it was somehow conveyed to us. Because somehow, I don't recall exactly how, it was like, I don't think you guys don't need, he's not going to be doing this at this time, but he's very flattered. That sort of thing, before we were just encouraged not to pursue it. But we ended up we by luck we had James Caan, because we never, I don't think we would have thought to offer it to him. We wouldn't have, we already had the sense that that was that we wouldn't get somebody like that. But we tried to get Bill Murray we tried at some length to get Bill Murray to do it, and we couldn't make any contact. We couldn't reach him. Yeah.
It's actually true. On our first movie, there was one part that we wrote for a specific actor who ended up doing it, and that we didn't audition in any way. And that was, we had seen Emmett Walsh do a movie, Ulu Grossbard movie called Straight Time with Dustin Hoffman. And so we thought, let's send the script to Emmett. And Emmett, came on and did it, and was kind of the big Hollywood actor and the only person who knew really anything about making movies who came on the set. So he was somebody that wasn't auditioned, but just we'd written the part.
Well, when you first were directing when you were staging scenes on that film, did you sort of know I'm thinking of it because when we were doing Bottle Rocket, we did many scenes without any actors who had really done anything. Including who hadn't been in a play or who hadn't acted at all. So we sort of had our method of how we arrive and start doing it, and it was all backwards. And when James Caan arrived, he was like, "What? This is not how you do it at all." The actors arrive in their street clothes. We rehearse the scene. Then you light, while you figure out the shots, we go off and go into makeup, and we get done up, and then we come back, and then you've lit something, and then we play that. And I'm like, no, I don't think we do it that way at all. I don't even know. You have to. And we, in fact, over the years, we've never really done it that way. I mean, now we have where everybody puts on their clothes in their hotel room, even, including a radio mic. Yeah. Did you already know sort of how it's done?
Well, I didn't know, but I was with an AD. A woman named Deborah Reinisch, who had done, actually, I don't think she'd done any features, but she'd done some after school specials or something like that. Yeah. And she knew, she was like, no, you have to, this is the way they come on the set in their street clothes. It was the same rap. But on the other hand, a lot of the actors we were working with, Fran had never done a movie or never been on a movie set. Yeah. So it's interesting when I think about it that the first day on a movie set for Fran was the first day I was on a movie set, but she didn't know what the light meter was. Why are you holding that thing up in front of me? I mean, she'd done theater because she'd gone to drama school, but she'd never been in even a student movie. Yes. Yeah. And she didn't understand what the protocol was in terms of set behavior, which on our movie was a little bit more because we had these sort of people who had done television
This is
stuff.
Frances McDormand, by the way. I think we might have some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I have one, thank you. I'm wondering about Blood Simple. Was there something in the idea that convinced you were that the envy wasn't going to fade away, the envy around the idea, and that you were ready to take it through the whole finding dentist process? And was it really the idea, or was it like Wes, the pure envy of shooting a feature film?
I think I missed some of that question. So, were you asking how we got it, in terms of how we got it made, or where the ideas came from?
Where the first impulse comes from, the idea, the envy, the willing of it.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
see.
Thank you.
Oh, that's interesting.
The envy, the desire to make it. Yes.
It's like fake,
okay.
Yes.
fake friends.
Yes.
The desire, that's an interesting question. I think, we wrote a script. This is something that I talked about recently, so this will be familiar to Bruno in another venue, but someone was asking about this sort of impulse to make movies in a more abstract way, as you are, which is an interesting question. And I said, and I think it's true, I think once you have an idea, or you write a story, or you write a script, it becomes a sort of illness. And the only way to cure yourself is to make the movie. You have to get it out of your system somehow, or you've been possessed by the idea in a way that does sort of feel a little sick. So we had written the script as my brother and I, as a sort of exercise in, we can write a horror film. That was sort of the idea. And once it's down on paper, you go, the obsession of actually getting it done becomes rather ridiculous. So, yeah. Do you find that at all?
Oh well, it's because we both had a recent experience of an unusual thing, which is we both made films that are collections of short stories, and I heard from you before I was shooting the one that I just did that it was extremely difficult. Just the idea, I had the notion that making short films, they're so contained. You do that one, it's finished, and you don't have as much the struggle or the weight of balancing a whole movie at once. We just started doing these little shorts, but in fact, it just was more like we made 5 movies in a short period of time. I even tried to build these gaps in the schedule, but it didn't. The gaps needed to be 3 months long or something like that to mean anything. So I regularly found myself saying, we didn't have to do this to everybody. We didn't have to cause this to happen. It didn't have to be made. It didn't have to exist. I'm happy we made it, and I was having a good experience too. But it is just a little bit like, I think a disease is a good description of it, because it's not. It's usually just sort of too much.
Yeah. It's funny that yes, we went through the same process of where we thought originally with the Westerns that we made that, we'll do them one at a time, like before we do another movie, and over 5 movies or something like that, and then we'll put them all together, or maybe we'll do something else with them, and then it's just not the way the world works in terms of actually getting down into the real, necessities of production. And you go, we ended up doing exactly like what you did. But it does feel like at the end of it, it's exhausting, because at the end of it like you have made 5 movies. It's not, even though each one is maybe only 15 or 20 minutes long.
Yes, but also in neither of our cases there are no sort of little films in it. Each one has its own whole, a completely different cast, which means different cast has to come and have their costumes and their everything created, completely different sets and locations, and often you cast a group of people, then tell their story over 90 minutes or whatever it is in an X number of places. This just jams all the things into the smaller period of time. Fewer things happen, but it takes basically the same preparation. But that doesn't sound like a very encouraging answer to your question about the wish to make cinema. But maybe the positive thing of it is that we still keep doing it.
Yeah, it's no, I know, but it's right. You do stop and ask yourself why.
One thing that I do find encouraging, and this is more a comment than a question, is that when you speak about we all here have experiences of making short films, and then by the end of production, which might be really short, 7-8 days, we feel like we've aged 20 years. And I feel like hearing you say that the experience, I mean, of course, it's many short films in one, but the experience of going through it is tiresome, and maybe even more tiring than a feature film, is very reassuring. And I don't know if a lot of people share that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in the case of both your The French Dispatch, which is your upcoming movie, and Buster Scruggs, were these projects that you had were thinking of doing for a long time to do like a collage of short stories? How did that come about?
How did yours come about?
Well, ours, I mean, yours, I think, is even longer gestating than ours, but ours is pretty good 10, 12 years of, I had originally wanted to do a thing. It was sort of supposed to be the New Yorker magazine. It was going to be an American story. And I made it French because I wanted to do a movie in France. So, and it's just sort of went that way over the years. But in fact, even the last movie the last one animated, Isle of Dogs, this was meant to be one of the stories. This movie we're doing, it's a collection of short stories that are all meant to be in this magazine that's a kind of American expatriate magazine, an American who went to France and made a magazine, and there's stories by different reporters in it. But one of the stories was by a Japanese writer living in this animated film. And just when I think about that, I was out of my mind. I mean, that I was going to make an animated stop motion film just as a part of another film. Yes, that would be. I mean, it took us 3 years to do that film, so to then put that into another film would be a kind of surreal thing to try to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
yours. You started many years ago,
yeah,
right?
many years ago. The first one that we wrote, and I think we weren't thinking about them as an anthology until we had written maybe 4 or 5 of them. The first ones were just written for fun and put in a drawer. And at a certain point, we realized we had, 4 short movies that we'd written over the years, and by that, over like 25 years, that were all Westerns. And we first thought, like I was saying, well, maybe we'll make them in front of each movie, we'll get someone to finance them, and that proved to be impractical. And then we started thinking more about, well, what if we made them all and released them as a feature, and at that point wrote the last 2 really. That are in the anthology, because as you see them in the movie is pretty much the order in which they were written. The Tim Blake Nelson one was written maybe 25 years ago, and I think reflects a kind of thinking and style that was it was obviously more comedic, and it kind of reflects more of that period of our writing, I think. And also this idea of, almost kind of channeling cartoons, that doing that in that, and musicals.
Yeah.
And the last one sort of were just the subject matter that we kind of gravitated to.
Is the second to the last the Zoe Kazan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one was written maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and then the last one, The Mortal Remains, we only wrote after we'd actually gotten financing to do it, and we thought, how do we wind this up?
Yeah.
It was sort of written. That was the only one that was sort of purpose written
For it to be
the
presented as
anthology.
one
Yeah.
film. Yeah. Interesting.
Any questions? Well, yeah.
There's a good director like Paul Thomas Anderson I have a question about there's a new trend about the director starts to do the cinematography like Paul Thomas Anderson or Curran, and would you like to try to do the future project without cinematographers, doing your own cinematography?
I'm looking for Bruno. But,
we both look over at Bruno.
No, I don't wish to do that.
No. Not in a million years. Yeah.
It could be like there could be an interesting segue from that question. I know Bruno, you're sitting over there, but I think it's interesting in the sense that this was The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I think is the first film that you shot digitally. Why?
Well, it's actually it was pretty straightforward. The why. This was a movie. When we first started talking to Bruno about it, we were talking about, what should we do? Should we shoot it on film, or should we shoot the previous movie that we'd done with Bruno? We did shoot on film, so it was up and it was up for grabs. And one of the things that there were a number of things that tipped us towards shooting it digitally. One was we were doing lots of exteriors. We wanted to sort of take advantage of the sort of full days that we had in terms of which is a marginally advantage shooting digitally. And we were also shooting for actually 2 more reasons. One is that there were also an enormous number of visual effects in the movie. And while that isn't a problem if you're shooting on film in any way, the actual workflow is a little bit easier when you're shooting digitally and you're finishing the movie. It's somewhat easier. And the last one was really we're doing it primarily for a streaming platform, and we want to try it. And this seems like a really good, if not now, when would be better to give that a try? And I think those were all, weighing those factors in, they were all factors that said, yes, let's shoot it digitally. And it was Bruno and I have talked a lot about what the pros and cons of that experience were, and it's a long discussion. It really is. I don't, just the.
Can I say, would you feel that the next one will be? What was it, Alexa? Is that what it was, Alexa? Will the next one likely be, or is that you have to decide that when you really know what you want to do?
I don't think we've come to a hard and fast decision about it, but I think we are actually leaning towards doing it digitally, because we're also thinking that the entire movie might be in black and white, and also that. And I did a movie in black and white years ago with Roger, but in a completely different way. And I know that you're doing black and white right now. And that's why I was really interested in what you were doing with Bob too, with the black and white, because you're shooting XX, right?
Yes, we shot it. Man Who Wasn't There, you shot color negative and printed black and white, right?
Exactly. Yeah, because we wanted to shoot on a fast. It's all about what the the faster emulsions were. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And in our case, as you know, we shot some of the movie is color, some of the movie is black and white, and sometimes I was changing my mind about which was which. So there are places where we shot half the scene in color and half black and white, and maybe not half, but something we shot in November, we shot on color stock, and we've made into black and white. But we knew always it's not really like, it wasn't like the difference between shooting on the double X negative was strikingly different from when we were just big, except for the places where the blown out part, the bright lights, they kind of do something different. They're less under control in the black and white stock. Does that sound like a proper?
It does sound right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, the embrace of new technology, especially if you have a long history of making movies a certain way with certain tools, is, that's a big vexed question that everyone has to grapple with. But,
I have a less technological question, but it's something I've been thinking about because you've worked in the Western genre quite. You've done that pretty significantly. What is it? But I know you've worked on locations, challenging locations. You're off in the mountains and things like that. But I'm interested to do a Western at some point. But I just think even about having. Is it a very challenging thing to be out deep in nature and have 20 horses?
Well, it's really okay.
Does that change your life?
I think Bruno and I would both, respond to that with the affirmative. But I found this last movie very stressful in a way because it was entirely exterior with almost virtually no cover and challenging weather. So when the last day of shooting, I remember saying to Fran, this is the first day in 4 months I looked up in the sky without anxiety about, what the weather was doing. But there's also an interesting thing that I heard from Bob when I saw him the other day, and I know that Bruno also has the right attitude about this, which was, if you, after a while, I think especially as a cinematographer, you have to be, you're just philosophical about those. You have to be, because there's nothing you can do to change it. And it's more a question of just, okay, now what do we do? And this will look beautiful anyway this way, or we're going to, I know that Bruno, for instance, was much more zen about that on the set than I was, or at least I was feeling, And I remember, and when Bob said that, I was like, yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Yes, I mean, you're just hoping for what you want, but then you're sort of going to have to just do it one way or another, and you can adapt a little bit and silk a little bit, and then just accept it, right?
You get very philosophical about it because there is nothing you can do. You see, I mean, that's a problem. You can have the bigger light. I remember when we were shooting the James Franco one, which was basically a nightmare because we spent a week there, and every day at noon it was raining, so we were trying to shoot as fast as we could in the morning. So all my plan fell apart. I was, in prep, I was saying, okay, we can start 9 looking this direction, and then we follow the sun, because I want it to be backlit, because that's the best way to have a continuity, especially with a scene which is under a tree with no shadows, with nothing, for 5 days or 6 days. So, and then suddenly I end up shooting with a front light, with backlight, with everything I could, just to shoot something, because it became a budget issue as well, or availability for James. He had to go back to wherever he was, and so it was just like, okay, we got to shoot, we got to finish this. And And there is a moment where you know that even if you have just like a soft sun or 60 kilos of light, there is no way you're going to light the whole landscape. So you say, okay, what can I do? That's it. So, and hopefully, if I don't totally fuck it up, I can.
Yes, and by the way, I mean, I have absolutely no. It's not like you. I have no sense of anything like that when I see that story. It's not. I mean,
no, you're
caught up in the story, and you see.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, there's a limit to it. There is a moment where I, with Joel and Ethan, I said, I can't match. When it was slightly overcast, when the sun vanished, it was okay. But when it became really like, a gray sky, you remember when we were shooting near the well, it was so dark that you said, it won't match. There is no way it's going to match. Or it's a big sky replacement. So suddenly they said, because they are intelligent, they said, okay, stop it. So
here's where we're reaching the threshold.
To it. It's not as if you said, okay, fuck it.
And sometimes it's bad luck, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes you have to make you get the most out of the luck that you've got. So when we, for instance, were shooting that big Indian battle at the end of the 5th story, where they're all coming over the hill, and it was very complicated and a number of days shooting in cobalt blue skies, right? Yeah. Forecast for the next, 36 hours or 48 hours, and the whole thing was, and then clouds coming in. And I think basically what we did was, we have this scheduled for 4 days or whatever it was, but we have to shoot it in 3, because at a certain point, then you're toast. You shot the whole thing with cobalt blue skies, and then the big storm clouds come in.
Yeah. So did you shoot it? So did you delay starting it a day, or you finished it early?
You finished it early.
You finished it early. Yeah. And you got all your shots. You just put the foot down and yeah.
I mean, I think we may have shot 1 or 2 shots of a reverse where. And we shot, and we did light in a totally different place. You lit for bright sun the stuff behind the berm. Remember on the last day of shooting?
Oh yeah,
all the close up. So we dumped all that stuff that wasn't,
where she and he, right. And not to hit this point too hard, but specifically horses.
Well, horses, you're absolutely right. Making Westerns is 98% about what the horses want. It's kind of awful, and you get really, really tired of it, and you get tired of why they.
Because they'll do the scene or they won't, or are the actors often? It's up to them to get the horse to do what needs to happen, or is it about wrangling horses into positions or it's all of it?
We actually had extraordinarily good wranglers on on the movie that Bruno and I worked together on True Grit, which was another Western that we did. It was a very different situation. But it's also, in the United States, it's very, very strict what you can and can't do with horses. And when you look at old Westerns from the 40s and 50s or 30s, what they were doing with horses is extraordinary, but completely not permissible now.
Right.
For humane reasons and all kinds of just what the contracts are and what's permissible on a movie set. Right. In fact, the rules about horses and how you treat horses on a movie set in the United States are much, much stricter than the ones about how you treat actors.
Right. Grown-up
That's
actors.
True.
Yeah. Right. Do horses have limited hours? I don't know.
No,
they can work long days.
No, I don't
think
so.
The oxen.
Listen.
The oxen. You can't work long hours with the oxen.
The oxen have to leave early.
They give up early and they do what they want.
Yeah.
They can't. They're not trainable.
Oxen.
Yeah.
They're wild animals.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's interesting. I mean, we were talking at the beginning of this conversation about the importance or how important it is to be prepared and to go onto set and to know what you're going to do on a given day, for both of you in a sense, to have this kind of sense of preparation. In a sense, perhaps it might be freeing for you, but then again, it seems like it also contradicts, and I think this has to do also with this history of Hollywood, and it contradicts the idea of being out in the open, facing the elements. Do you get a thrill? I mean, out of this idea of trying to prepare for the best, but then throwing yourself at a Western, and in the case of Buster Scruggs, and knowing that you will not be able to control everything. Does that also like generate some kind of creative drive?
You know, I think Wes and I are both control freaks, but I think that's something we share. But I think, you know, I think even though it might not be what you're looking for or what you enjoy most, if you do go outside and make a movie like that, you have to find some pleasure in those situations. They can't just be irritating. The world is against you. The weather's bad. You have to surrender and find some pleasure in those challenges and figuring them out.
Yes, and you definitely have the times where it's like, well, we really are on a crazy adventure right now, and even though there's something for me, each phase of the movie is I'm kind of happy for it to end. You know, each part, by the time you get to the end, to that point, you know, you're sort of ready to shoot the movie. When it's time to start shooting the movie, you're desperately ready for it to end when it stops. But I'm always looking forward to the next part. You know, I'm like, now we're starting to edit. We haven't quite finished shooting the movie, but we're editing. But even when I'm thinking all I want to do is now sit on a couch in the editing room and just figure out what we have here, there's still, you know, there are thrilling moments there's nothing quite like it in the cutting room, you know.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, before, I think we could. Because I think, Wes, you have to leave a little bit before we move to editing, which is something that I think a lot of our students are eager to think about. I think one big subject that I think unites both of your film careers is working with actors. And right before we were talking about Bill Murray, for instance, just as a starting point, Wes, you wanted to work with Bill Murray from the get-go, from the first film. Was there a specific reason why you wanted to cast Bill Murray in your films? Did you have the impression that there was growing up with his movies, did you have the impression that he wasn't given some sort of justice? Is there a feeling of I want to give a space to this actor to be what he can potentially be on screen?
I didn't think about that I was going to do something for him. I sort of thought this guy would do something for us. But it was that it was, in the case of Bill Murray, was because there were these few movies he had done that were really more. He had a particular thing. He'd done so many comedies, and he was hugely famous in America then too. He's just giant star. But he'd done maybe 3 movies where he played not really comic roles. He'd done The Razor's Edge. He'd done a movie, The Razor's Edge, which is, you know, basically a drama, but he kind of played it lightly, and he was very good at it. He was just very appealing in it. And he'd done this one, Mad Dog and Glory. Did you ever see that one? John McNaughton did. Yeah. And he was great in this movie with Robert De Niro, Uma Thurman. And then he'd also played a role, which was a funny part, but in Ed Wood he'd played this quite small part that he was sort of like surreally interesting in, and Tootsie also in a quite. I mean, a lot of other movies, but those I had thought of and thought, oh, we have a character who I feel like we can, not only will he be great, but it'll be interesting to see him doing the kind of movie that isn't his bread and butter right now. So maybe that would have both how great he is with that extra surprise or something like that. But then when I met him and you know got to know him, I learned so much from him, and really just felt very indebted to him pretty immediately. You know, this was when we were doing Rushmore. We were in Houston. We were actually shooting in my old high school, and Bill, you know, he appeared and started trying to cheer up the mood, and he did it all through the movie. You know, he wasn't with us that long. He was probably with us for 2.5 weeks or something. But he made a point of trying to kind of help, sort of to find out what do you need, what would you like to have help with, you know, I mean, one thing he started doing was, which I hadn't done before, was he likes to move gear. You know, he likes to carry dolly track. Yes. So when you say everything over here is now got to go over here, that is one thing when we've announced that and we're supposed to. It's another thing when Bill Murray is picking up things. Then everybody starts picking up things. I mean, and then suddenly, 45 seconds later, everything's over here. And that was fast. So I started doing that, and eventually, I say now I'm kind of more like, yeah, Bill's going to move some of this stuff. I'm just going to wait it out for a minute here. But you know, that kind of thing was very encouraging and helpful, and also just made me think like, oh, I see there's different rules. He always said, you know, in America, you're not really supposed to touch the gear, the equipment of other people, but he has a Directors Guild card. He said Directors Guild crosses all lines. We can do anybody's job, which he's eager to do anybody's job. So,
yeah. That's why, is that part of the reason why you continue, like, throughout your career, Bill Murray makes recurrent appearances in the films? Is it also, I mean, not only because of his acting talent, of course, but also because he brings this kind of energy and
that helps, but the main thing is, you know, you've written your characters and you want to just have great actors play them, and I know where to find him. You know, I mean, I mean, we've both worked with lots of people over and over again, and you know, it's fun to first if you're friends with great actors, that's a huge advantage. You know, that's like a major kind of ammunition to have in your arsenal. And then it's fun to, you know, get your gang together, and it's also fun to have new actors to you know, surprise you. Yeah.
And also, you know, the actors that Wes works with over and over again, they are doing something. He's letting them or asking them to do something that he knows they can do that they haven't necessarily done or you've seen before, which is always, you know, it's because he's familiar with these actors, he knows what they can do, even if nobody else has taken advantage of that before. So that's also fascinating to watch.
Well, you've worked with lots of people in the same ways repeatedly, but you've often had people who I've never seen before, like the guy who plays I can't remember the name of the character. He's the one who at the end of the story with Zoe Kazan, he's got to go tell. He didn't know what he was going to tell him. That actor, I never heard of him, seen him before. He's so great and wonderful. He's not a kid, but. I think that comes from meeting lots of them. I mean, reading lots of people.
Yeah, that's reading a lot of people. That is an actor named Granger Hines, who's been around a long time, doing small parts in television, and sometimes it's about if you read a lot of people and then you realize there's this strange thing which just is the one of or maybe not one of, but certainly in this case, the actor meets the part. You know, it's that's the fit. It's not necessarily you've got Laurence Olivier walking in the room, but you've got the Olivier of that part.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. That's it. I also had that with Josh Brolin, Kelly MacDonald. Not what I would think. Not like who you think in advance. They're both so great in it. Kelly MacDonald gives every appearance of coming from Odessa, Texas, or something like that in that film, and you know she's from Scotland, and I think that happens from just actually seeing somebody. They do it for you. Yeah.
No, in fact, we didn't want to see Kelly initially because she's Glaswegian and she has a Glasgow accent, and we're looking for Texans, and then some actors have amazing facility with those kinds of dialects, and she does, and it's very disorienting because she would go in and out of it constantly. Right. If you were talking to her, and then yes.
Yeah. So that do you find it creatively for both of you liberating to, now that you've worked with so many actors through the years, in terms of envisioning your next projects, do you find it liberating to be able to imagine a part for a specific actor when you're writing? Or
do you do that a lot? I mean, do you often do it?
I think it's kind of half and half. We've written in the past. I don't think there are any things that we've written where we weren't thinking, at least in one or two cases, of a specific actor. Have you?
Well, at a certain point, always at a certain point, I'm like, yeah, and then often it's something even before there's really a scene or something. It's a person. Yeah. Jeff Bridges was always the dude, right? There was no moment when he wasn't.
Although he didn't initially want to play that, and I think had he persisted in saying no, we probably would not have made the movie.
Right.
But we went up and convinced him.
And
it wasn't that big a stretch for him
to finally accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it reminds me of a story Brad Pitt told. This is Brad Pitt talking to a reporter. He said when we met him to do Burn After Reading, Brad's saying, and he said to us, "Man, I don't know if I can play this part. This character is just so fucking stupid." And he said, there was a long pause, and then Joel said, "You'll be fine." Now that was Brad.
I have a question more about your filmography and the Coen brothers. You have directed a lot of different kind of genre, like for Western, drama, comedy. But with and you can find a lot of things similar between your film with the tone and special kind of humor and a family of actor. But I feel like for Wes Anderson, it's more like the same path that you the same kind of film that you direct, specifically more in an aesthetic way. And I wonder if one day you wanted to, you talk about Western, and perhaps if you deal with your fear of horse, you will do Western. But I feel like every film you can, in one image, you can say this is a Wes Anderson movie. And I wonder if you don't want to surprise the audience and make like a film which is completely different, and for the audience to say, oh my God, I didn't recognize this.
Yes.
What happened
Well,
to him?
I always feel like I'm doing that. I always, I'd make a movie in a different country with a completely different kind of story, and I have one friend who will bluntly say, yeah, it's more of the same, more of the same. I feel a little bit like I don't know how to try harder to do that. It's it might be just my problem. But I do want. The thing is, like, I want to do a Western, but you already know what it's going to be like.
Oh, I want to see that Western. Yeah, I know your question of style is really a slippery thing, because it's not even something you don't think about any of those issues consciously, really. You do what you can do, and then you get confronted with very strange sort of reactions to it. In our case, it's always been, it's often been things like, oh, well, they've stopped doing their nonsense and finally this is something else. Yeah. And the next one after that is, oh, they finally stopped doing their nonsense and playing the one before was nonsense again. Right. Yes, you just don't.
Yes. Well, the last movie I did was stop motion animated, and half of it was in Japanese. I thought I really branched out, but I don't think so. I think it's pretty similar to the other ones, really. I think it is.
Yeah, and I mean, it also, I'm quite surprised as well by that, because in a sense, I feel like, throughout this conversation and what I've read about both of your works, there's this kind of sense of constantly wanting to invent or reinvent ways of making movies, and I think this is something that also maybe there's a bridge between both of your creative visions, in the sense that I think about both Grand Budapest Hotel and Hail Caesar as movies where you're trying to find paths back to a way of making movies that just simply doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's also something that be it the Esther Williams style choreographies, water choreographies, or these this use of miniatures that I imagine comes from a kind of vision of Hollywood that's kind of disappearing or disappeared. Is this also part of your your creative vision, to try and always go back to the past in order to innovate in filmmaking? Easy question.
Yeah, well, definitely. In so many of your films, I see your inspirations from the history of movies. Also, but they're literary inspirations, they're cinema inspirations. For me, when you mentioned miniatures, the thing with a miniature is you can make it very elaborate. You can do anything you want with a miniature, and I love miniatures in films. But every time I do we go to great lengths to create the best miniature we can, but I know a miniature does not there was a time when a miniature
was supposed to be read realistic.
It was supposed to be real. That was convincing to an audience at that time, and I know now it's not. And yet, still, when the time comes of actually showing the movie, feel like I hope people. I'm somehow desperately hoping our miniatures are now real. I lose my nerve, but it's too late anyway. But I think I do them because it's a symbol. I love miniatures as a way of telling a story, or setting a scene. It's fun to work with miniatures to me.
Yeah, and for my part, when I see, when I think about the movies that we've done, but also when I see Wes's movies, you understand that as strong as the style is that he's working in, and as unique and completely unique and individual, there's also, you know, the river of cinema in it. It's and even when I was down on where you were shooting, and you see, you know, the Blu-rays that you had in terms of the mostly French movies that, and you understand and you see in the movie again, no matter how strong the imprint is, you understand where so much of it is coming from, because he is, you know, he is steeped and aware of and channeling a long history of motion pictures, which is, you know, I think that's what, there are very few naive artists. That's what everyone is trying to do, and it comes through really clearly in your movies. So, and it's what makes it enriches them and makes them interesting, and is also the inspiration for them in a certain way.
I mean, we all. I mean, I think we all chose to try to do this because of other movies. You know, it's just watching movies. I mean, you love to watch movies, and then you want to draw from that. It's
3:30.
Okay, so I should make my exit.
I just wanted to,
on.
which is not a very glamorous way to say.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I wish I could stay for the rest of it, but.
And I think.